Welcome to All Things Moore County, Moore County's weekly radio show highlighting the many facets of the Sandhills. That includes real estate, lifestyle, community and neighborhoods. And now from 4 Properties, here's your host, Bill Sahadi.
Good morning and welcome to the talk show All Things Moore County. Dorothy, every December, every Christmas, we usually have shows detailing events.
Yes.
2020 has been an exception to the rule for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But one of the, there are certain events and certain times of the year that act as calendar identifiers. Mm-hmm. And at Christmas time, one of the things that people who live in the Southern Pines and Pinehurst area always think about is the Weymouth Center.
Oh, yeah.
The Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities has a storied history. And as our changing demographics show, there are a lot of people who are learning about it. And today we're going to have an opportunity to speak all about the Weymouth Center, what it means to Southern Pines, what it means to Moore County, and to talk about some of the events, because even in this year of the pandemic, it is one of the most iconic, established facilities for people to visit. It's an icon in Southern Pines. And I'm being joined today by Kathryn Talton, who is the president of the board of directors and the publicity chairperson. Katie Wyatt, who is a co-chair on the fundraising committee and the music committee chairperson. And Dottie Starling, who is a board member of Weymouth since 1996. She's also the librarian, the archivist, and one of the most interesting ladies who can talk about Weymouth, its meaning, its history, and it's just fascinating. About a year and a half ago, Dottie joined me at a closing at the property that James Boyd built for his mother in Chalene, and welcomed the new owners. I believe it was in June of 2019.
July.
Oh, see that?
It was my birthday.
I should just carry you around with me, and you can correct everything I say.
It was my birthday, I remember.
Is that right?
Yes.
And she welcomed the new owners of Inchaline and shared a lot of history about Weymouth. Kathryn, 2020 is almost over, and you're standing.
We are. We're finding ways to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And although we had to cancel our holiday festival this year, we do have other exciting things on the forefront, and we're keeping current and trying to invite people to continue to enjoy Weymouth.
Right. The pandemic has set you back in terms of visibility, getting people in.
Mm-hmm. It has. The thing that we have found, though, is we have even more people visiting the property to just enjoy the space, because there are not many places you can go right now and have a picnic or bring your family or take some pictures or read a book, walk your dog, walk your kids.
Right.
And we're open for that.
The grounds at Weymouth are open to the public. They are gorgeous. People are surprised when they realize that they're open to the public. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're a little intimidated, some of the younger families who are moving into town, because maybe it looks private, but it's not. Any Sunday afternoon, you can go over there and stroll the grounds.
Absolutely. We're open from dawn to dusk, and we find more and more families are discovering us. And we do look like the big house on the hill a little bit.
Right.
But we are a nonprofit that is open to the public, and we invite the public to come and enjoy during those hours. Keep your dog on a leash, but please come.
There have been many events in the month of December that we've had you on the show where families can come in with their kids and walk through the home, and it's a very gracious property. Can you very briefly, before we get into the fundraising, give us a brief history of Weymouth for those who might never have heard of it or are not aware of? They know it's a pretty home, but that's all they know.
It was originally the home of James and Kathryn Boyd. James was a best-selling novelist in the 20s and 30s who went on to buy and publish the newspaper here, The Pilot, and after his death, Kathryn, his wife, continued to do so until the 1960s. 1968. And then Sam Reagan picked it up. And upon her death, She'd actually left the house to Sandhills Community College, thinking that it would be a great place, perhaps for expansion of classroom and landscape development classes. However, the college really didn't know what to do with the property. And when they put it on the market, Sam Reagan didn't want to see it become a developed property with houses all over it. He got a group of people together. They raised the money to purchase the house, created a 501c3 nonprofit designed to preserve the history of the Boyds, the family, the land around it, and also to be an arts and culture center, a center for humanities. And in 1979, we were founded. So we're 40 years old, and we have outstanding programs for everyone, for children, for families, whether you're interested in literature, in gardening, in reading, in archiving, in history. If you want to come and become a volunteer, we are a volunteer-driven organization, and we really are completely trying to be part of the community, not just to preserve, but to serve in this community.
Weymouth has been the home to many Moore County weddings.
Yes.
It's been the home to many, many different types of private parties, which is open to the public. It's a facility that appeals to all the different generations living here. Your website is great, and I encourage people to go on it. And it opens with the story of Weymouth as a continuous narrative of conservation, literature, music, and hospitality. But all of this comes at a cost, doesn't it, Katie?
It certainly does.
Fundraising is a very, very important part of the success and the viability of the Weymouth Center.
It is. As a charity, as a 501c3, Weymouth is dedicated to remaining open and available to the community for the community's embrace. The reason I got involved with Weymouth is because I have a young family. I'm also a musician, and discovered Weymouth as both a beautiful place to go, just the grounds to be in the space, but it's also a beautiful group of people to be with. There's a community that really supports Weymouth. As Kathryn said, it's totally volunteer driven. And the idea that we as a community are responsible now, the Boyds have left this place to the community of Southern Pines and Pinehurst. It's our responsibility jointly to make sure that it stays alive and stays open and remains beautiful and available for everyone. To that end, we have some really exciting ways that people can get involved and help make sure that Weymouth can remain available for everyone. With the with COVID-19 and with the coronavirus, all of the events that we had planned in the spring and throughout the summer, weddings, rentals, provide significant income to Weymouth being able to run. We're looking at about $100,000 deficit this year as a result of lack of income. So we're trying to raise those funds through a number of really exciting events. One way is through a very generous partnership with Frank Pierce at Eye Candy.
Yep.
Bill just bought one of
I
these
did.
And has
They're beautiful.
helped keep Weymouth alive through his donation. Eye Candy has agreed to donate all these gorgeous prints of Weymouth, which you can buy for $100 a piece.
Right.
The proceeds all go to Weymouth.
Right.
You also, if you're listening, should have received something in the mail as part of our year-end campaign. We're trying to raise about $25,000 through our year-end fundraising appeal.
Yep.
You can do that through making a gift online or through the mail. Send in your check to Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities. Finally, we have a really exciting partnership if you're a musician like myself, or if you just love a good party. We've partnered with Casino Guitars and Cavell Vodka and Spirits to have a Stratocaster guitar, which you can buy. Tickets are $25. It's a raffle entry. You can if you walk on Main Street downtown, you can see the display in Casino Guitars, and for raffle entry, price of $25, you can win the guitar, this gorgeous spread of vodka and spirits for your next party, gift certificate to Ashton's.
Yeah.
It's a really
Drum
nice a drum kit. It's this huge. It's awesome. I think it's a really great way to invite people to support Weymouth.
What type of musician are you?
I'm a violist. I play with the Carolina Philharmonic also, and the music that we do here at Weymouth, it's a special experience to have music performed in that space, in that house.
Describe for me what it's like to play at the Weymouth House.
It's very so. I am looking forward to my first performance at the Weymouth Center, but the performances I've seen and been part of actually are the young musicians performing. We have a really great program called the Young Musicians Festival, where pianists from all over the county come together and they enter into a competition, and the winners get both a prize towards their studies. They get a tuition support prize for continuing on in music in college or just their continued studies in music, plus the chance to perform at Weymouth. And it feels like it kind of feels like you're going back in time. It's a
Right.
beautiful,
Right.
intimate experience. It's a gathering of people in the great room at Weymouth, which when we are back open, anyone can come and see. And it means that you are celebrating both the space and the spirit of the humanities at Weymouth. It's about creativity.
The grounds at Weymouth are very organic. They're very civilized, and there's a real strong spirit there. You mentioned as one of the fundraisers what Frank Pierce is doing at Eye Candy. And the print that he's selling for $100 is a side view of the buildings, which shows and features the gorgeous grounds, which you cannot see from Connecticut.
That's true.
You have to
Yes.
walk onto the grounds and walk off to the right.
Yeah.
And what it takes you through is sort of like a mini version of the Biltmore House
Yes.
on a smaller scale, but it is gorgeous.
Sure is.
People, if they only knew, they are welcome to walk through there. Social distancing is easy.
Yeah.
And this is one of the prettiest times of the year. So the prints are absolutely keepsakes.
Oh,
And
yes.
I think he's going to actually have a raffle.
That's right. So when you buy a print, you
Right.
get entered into a raffle to win the original painting. And there's no extra purchase for the raffle. You just are automatically entered in when you buy your print. And I just also want to emphasize that all gifts are welcome. We think a lot about the people that we see on Weymouth grounds. We call them the Weymouth walkers and the dog walkers, who are out and about. At this moment, every gift, at any moment, every gift is so meaningful if you're able to contribute $25 or $2,500 to help keep Weymouth open. We just want to welcome your support.
When you went to college, they didn't have a course in fundraising, did they?
They did not.
They didn't
actually.
have a course that said thinking outside the box. Did
And
they?
as a musician, that is how I came to be in the position I'm in. But I think the humanities and the spirit that Weymouth encompasses is this idea of thinking outside the box, being a creative place and space. And the thing that I speak most often about is the ability to be with this incredible community of supporters at Weymouth. When you see the grounds, to know that they're all volunteer, the Weymouth gardeners are just amazing. What is our name for them?
Dirt gardener.
The dirt gardeners.
They call themselves that by
right.
choice.
Yeah, the dirt gardeners is another wonderful way to volunteer to help keep the grounds of Weymouth alive.
Yeah. For the month of December, what does it look like with COVID for people who want to visit the Weymouth House? Is it limited? How restricted is it, Kathryn?
So currently you can come on the grounds, and we are actually going to be fully decorated as of this afternoon.
Oh.
The dirt gardeners have decorated the two entrances, both from Vermont and from Connecticut. And there we have what the committee festival, unfortunately the festival that we had to cancel, put a beautiful lit tree in the bay window overlooking the grounds that you've just been talking about.
Right.
There's for anybody who's actually coming in on business or needs to come in for some reason, we do have a tree in the great room in the tradition of the Boyds, because it would be so sad for there not to be a tree in the great room at Weymouth. And the board of directors is decorating the front of the house this afternoon starting at 1:00. So we'll be fully dressed up, come and spend time on the grounds, bring a blanket, bring a chair, bundle up. Socially distancing on 26 acres of beautiful grounds is pretty easy.
Is the are the viewings set up for December now strictly outside?
Yes.
Okay. So 2021 is an unknown at this point. We're still in the restrictions, and things are still, sort of critical. So you have to sort of be at the ready, but you don't know which way to pivot yet.
Well, amazingly, we are booking very rapidly because there were so many wedding cancellations this year.
I'm sure.
And we also had to cancel, unfortunately, the North Carolina Literary Hall of Fame inductions. So those have been rescheduled for next October at this time. But we're full steam ahead in planning. We believe that we need to be ready to jump forward or backward and be flexible to meet the mandate and meet the demands of the community. So we're full steam ahead on creation.
Could I add something here? Katie was talking about the music.
Good morning.
These were, for years, we have had the chamber music on Sunday. They're now referred to as classically Sundays, but we have chamber music groups that come in, and they're mostly associated with our state universities, but they're musicians who have performed all around the world. These are first-class musicians, and they're very popular, and it's a wonderful place. These musicians love to come to Weymouth, and they keep coming back, and they can't wait now for Weymouth to open up again so they can come back and play some more.
And just to add to that, we're continuing some concerts online. So be sure to check out Weymouth's Facebook page and our website as well. Some of our musicians are continuing to perform digitally and virtually and sharing it with us.
I've noticed on social media this year there's been a tremendous amount of creativity online where people are either presenting music, singing, selling products online, marketing. It's the way you have to reach out to people these days of social distancing.
Yes, and I think also it's a nice way to just allow musicians to keep performing, which
You're
is
right.
our gift. We're dying to have the music come out, and also for people to enjoy it and remember that there is more to our lives than hunkering down and being isolated.
Right. I'm on YouTube in the evening. There's not a lot to do. You want to stay home.
Yeah.
And you can pick up all these people that are
Broadcasting.
marketing.
Yes,
Right.
yeah.
And it's the way to reach people at this point. Let's come back in the second set. We're going to speak with Dottie. We're talking all about the Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities. This is All Things Moore County. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our second set, speaking all about the Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities. We want to segue a little bit into the history of the Weymouth Center and the surrounding area. But before we do, Dottie, and I want to ask you this question. We live in an area of changing demographics and have for the last 10 to 15 years. Are you afraid that some of the people, the younger families that are moving into town, they could be military families, as we have so many kids in the schools, that they lose sight or they never got the story about what Weymouth is all about, and we want to preserve that, don't we?
Oh, yes, we do. Weymouth Center is just a continuation of who the Boyds were. The Boyds were all about community responsibility. And I wish I had brought a list with me of all the things that they have done, all the things that they were involved with, like the hospital, and Kathryn Boyd with starting a maternity ward in the hospital and that kind of thing. And they were not only local, but they were national. And like when James Boyd, in World War II, he was not able to participate physically. So he got together with a bunch of his writer friends, And these were the most important writers and most
Of the time.
well-known writers of the time, and also the actors. And they put together a series of radio plays in 1941, which was about the meaning of democracy and the
How timely.
and this was actually on CBS radio in 1941 for several months. So, they were always, so that was not only local, but that was using all his talents to reach out and support. And we always need to support our democracy. So
James Boyd brought a lot of celebrated writers to Southern Pines, didn't he?
yes, well, his best friend apparently was Paul Green. And if you don't know Paul Green and you live in North Carolina, you need to find out. He was one of the most important people in literature and in racial equality, that kind of thing in the state. Another one of his friends was Struthers Burt, who actually lived in a house called Hibernia, and he had bought that house and enlarged it. But he had been James Boyd's English instructor at Princeton.
Oh.
And then he became his mentor because James Boyd came to him and said, I'm writing some poetry and I just want you to give me some feedback. Well, they became lifelong friends then. So Struthers Burt eventually, after James Boyd moved to Southern Pines, and Kathryn, he and his wife, who was also named Kathryn, they moved to Southern Pines. And Struthers Burt was very interested in conservation. And he also owned a dude ranch in Wyoming. So, and the Boyds went out there sometimes. So all these different influences. He also, of course, knew F. Scott Fitzgerald, which is probably his most well known for. Everybody comes to Weymouth and says, "Oh, Fitzgerald was here." But as far as we know, he was only at Weymouth once in 1935. But he did come to Weymouth.
Okay.
And there was, of course, James Boyd's first novel, Drums, was his most famous, and that was about the American Revolution. And that became part of Scribner's Illustrated Classics, which was a fabulous honor for him his book to be included in that. And all of those books were illustrated by N.C. Wyatt. So N.C. Wyatt also came to Weymouth and has been at Weymouth.
I did not know that.
And he gave 3 of his original paintings for illustrations for Drums to the Boyds. And in 1949, Kathryn Boyd gave them to the Southern Pines Library in the town of Southern Pines. And you can still see those 3 original NCYS paintings in, I think it's the town administration building next to the post office in Southern Pines.
That's right.
Yeah.
I used to live near Chadsford, Pennsylvania.
Oh, did you?
And
Yeah.
I actually met Andrew Wyatt.
Oh, my goodness.
And Jamie.
Oh, that's exciting.
They would
Yeah.
eat at there was a little pub in Chadsford right across from the Weymouth Museum. And he's still very iconic illustrator, painter. And N.C. Wyeth to Andrew was his father? Or
Yes.
is that N.C. was the father? Okay.
Yes.
Is it true that the Boyd family also, they're responsible for donating a lot of land to Southern Pines?
Well, when the grandfather, James Boyd I, moved to Southern Pines area around 1904,
Right.
he had come looking for land for a winter home for his family with his daughter Helen Boyd Dull. And she saw the longleaf pine trees and saw how they were being clear cut, and just was horrified because the southeastern part of the United States, something like 90 million acres, had back in the 1600s. There was like 90 million acres of these longleaf pines and this beautiful forest. And right today, there's something like 2 million left. So in the early 1900s, Helen was just devastated at the thought of this. And so she and her father decided that not only were they going to buy land here, but they were going to buy as much of the pine forest as they could.
Right.
And thanks to their efforts, Weymouth Woods now, and this area, still has the oldest longleaf pine trees, I believe, in the world.
Right.
They're like 460 some years old, the oldest one. And years later, in 1963, I think it was, Kathryn Boyd, who was widowed at the time, but she was really big into conservation of the pine trees, and she gave around 400 acres to the state of North Carolina to open up the state's first nature preserve, which is Weymouth Woods Sandhills Nature Preserve. And then in 1979, there was a man named Admiral Gallatin, Pete Gallatin, and he had been recruited by Elizabeth Stevenson Ives to be the first president of Friends of Weymouth, and he was one of the incorporators in February 1977. So I have read that he had said the thing he was most concerned about was saving the pine forest and the endangered red cockaded woodpeckers.
Right.
So he was looking around to see what we could do to save this land. And meanwhile, the local Sierra Club was also interested. They were writing editorials, we need to save these pine trees. So Admiral Gallatin and the first Weymouth board arranged through the Nature Conservancy to sell more acreage to the state. And so that way, that gave them enough money to purchase a property, but it also preserved forever what they called the round timber tract. And you can actually access that part of Weymouth Woods, which goes to the oldest pine tree, from Weymouth property. They're contiguous. And every year, when it's, of course, I don't think they did it this year, but every year they have a party for the oldest longleaf pine. And,
Right.
One year I went and they had a cake that was like a pine tree stump,
It's obvious to me you have so much information in your head. You should write a book. You should put it all on paper, because there's so much that what you're saying gets passed down to people. In this age, in this day and age where we have so much development and changing going on with our landscape, it's nice to know that the Weymouth Center and its surrounding areas are preserved.
Well, that was just a piece of the puzzle, going back to the Boyds, starting with the grandfather Boyd, the one who originally bought up the land. The family decided they wanted to control how things developed around them. They didn't want things just to be hodgepodge.
Right.
And so they recruited Alfred Yeomans, who had been working since, I think, 1912 with the family, to develop what the area they call Weymouth Heights. And now that is the place to live, I understand, in Southern Pines, if you lived in Weymouth. And James Boyd, the author James Boyd, who built the current Weymouth House, his brother Jackson acted as attorney for the family in selling a lot of these properties. And so that's how they could control, because, they set up, and they had, of course, restrictions on what kind of houses and how they wanted the place to develop. And that is now still a really beautiful area.
Yeah. In 1920, James Boyd built what's now known as the Weymouth Center, that house.
Yes.
And then in 1924, he built in Chalene, which was
That's
a home
right.
for his mother. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And in between the two properties, for anybody driving on Connecticut, they can look off to their right or their left and see these two beautiful properties. In between is one of the public entrances to Weymouth Woods.
That's the point I was talking about, yes. Yeah, that's the beginning of the area where you can go and you can take walks through there. You can ride a horse through there,
See horses all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just a very special corner of Southern Pines that hopefully people will realize it's available to them to see. I'll never forget the joy that you had when you spoke with the Spackies when they purchased in Chalene, in educating them on the background. And they were so interested because they knew they were purchasing property in a very esteemed area with a real history.
Well, they did, because the Boyds really, as you can see by how they disposed of the land that they bought, that they were really interested in being a good influence on the town of Southern Pines.
Right.
And I don't think people realize now that Southern Pines just would not be what it is. And back to Helen Boyd Dull, James Boyd's aunt, she actually was one of the founders of the Southern Pines Civic Club, and they were the ones that planted all those beautiful trees and shrubs along the railroad tracks. Where else can you go in North Carolina and see the railroads? There's so many little towns where railroad tracks go through the town, but not many of them where it's like a garden along the railroad track.
And the Southern Pines Civic Club today is located down on Ash Street.
Yes.
It's
yes.
that soft green building right off Pennsylvania. Ash in Pennsylvania, I think.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Are you going to write a book?
We're going to make sure it happens.
How about an expose?
That's right. We're gonna
It may
help
not be a
make sure
book,
it
but
happens.
I'm going to start writing an awful lot of papers. I actually
right.
started doing this a while back when I first got on the board in 2015.
How about a blog?
Oh, no,
And
I'm not really.
How
in
about a
this-
radio show?
Oh, full time. You really could.
And the stories that go with the
Yeah.
place and the people. There, it's not just the history, but the stories of the people.
Katie?
Well, I think just to talk about it, when Veterans Day comes up in the fall, and I've been meaning to write something about this, about James and his brother Jackson and their involvement in World War I and in World War II. And then in World War I, Eleanor Boyd, who was the first owner of Insuline, she actually donated an ambulance to the Americans in Europe in World War I.
Let's go back to Katie's suggestion. In 2021, would you have any interest in hosting a show? I'll leave. You can just come and sit here and talk about something very specific. The show is about 45 minutes of airtime. It fills an hour. I think listeners would be very, very interested to do something in depth. Well, we can talk about it.
We'll consider options.
Okay.
Great.
She sounds like a politician. We'll consider options. The Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities is the hallmark of Southern Pines, and it's very important that we have conversations about this great institution. This is All Things More County. We'll be back in the third set. Welcome back to our final set, talking about the Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities. We're going to talk a lot in this section about the extensive programming offered at the Weymouth Center. Before we do, though, Dottie, I want to go back just briefly and circle back and talk to you about the holiday traditions that are coming up.
Okay, well, I'd like to start going back to how James and Kathryn Boyd and their family celebrated Christmas at the Boyd house. The earliest information that I have about them comes from their daughter Nancy, from a talk she gave at Weymouth in 1980. And I'd like to put a quote here because it was really cute. She said, "There were the cousins, Cousin Lucy and Cousin Belle, and the aunts, who converged on us at Christmas from various parts of the globe, bearing chocolates, a golden nugget, voluminous knitting and elaborate jade necklaces, and a hearing aid the size of a radio. To this small and greedy child, they had no existence apart from their month with us." So you could see that they were happy times, they were family times, and I can imagine the Boyd house being full of all the relatives.
Right.
And with Kathryn Boyd's love of music, they certainly included converging around the piano, and she had a grand piano, and singing Christmas carols with the family. Now, James Boyd was a good cartoonist, and he and Kathryn made their own Christmas cards, which were all black and white line drawings, and some of them almost look like silhouette drawings. One we have is of a girl, most likely their daughter Nancy, with her pigtails flying, falling off a ladder while she was decorating the tree. family members with outstretched arms all racing towards her, and the pet dogs were racing away from the confusion. So that's probably the cutest of the ones I saw. Another shows a mama foxhound bringing a loaded stocking to her pups at Christmas time, and that's since the boys always had the horses and the foxhounds. That was a cute one. And another one shows 5 dogs, and apparently these were hounds and Sealyhams, because the foxhounds and the Sealyham terriers were what the boys always had.
Mm-hmm.
And these dogs were barking frantically at the Christmas tree, and then you look, and at the top of the tree, instead of the decoration, it's usually at the top, there's a cat perched up there, so you can see why the dogs are going wild. So
You talk about a time gone by.
yes.
You paint a word picture, but on a bigger scale, you're talking about one of the major attractions of this area to people, because it reminds them of the towns they grew up in as kids.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about the Weymouth Center and the Boyd family that you're trying to preserve that today. There are no video games today. I mean, today the kids have so many distractions.
Mm-hmm.
But this was an old-fashioned Christmas.
Yes, it was, very much so. And to think that, that would be a whole another show, talking about the boys and how they entertained themselves.
That's what we're talking about doing with you.
They were a fun couple, I'd say. And this was a fun place to live. They worked hard and they played hard.
Your word pictures are great.
But there's a family photograph from 1942 that's entitled The Last Family Christmas Together.
Okay.
And it's complete with these same aunts and cousins. But this one is rather poignant because it is in the middle of World War II, obviously, 1942. Older son James is in his Navy uniform in the photo, and younger son Dan is in his Army uniform. And just as today with the COVID-19 pandemic, the war brought worry and insecurity and fear for the future of their loved ones. Also in the photograph, sitting on the ground with daughter Nancy and the family pets, is a young girl about 10 years old. Her name was Eve Ewart, and she was from Glasgow, Scotland. And she, along with thousands of other children, had been sent out of the British Isles to other countries around the world for protection against the Nazi bombing. And I'd like to say, too, that, yes, Eve did make it safely back to her family in Scotland. And I know this because her children visited Weymouth recently to see where the mother had been.
Yes.
And that was I would never have known that story or known who this girl was in the picture. In the years that a widow, Kathryn Boyd, lived in the house without her family, she then continued the tradition of Christmas carols. She invited family and friends and business associates from the pilot, as well as their children. So here again, the great room was overfull, I'm sure. Weymouth has one of her guest lists, as well as her list of carols from 1958, such as O Come All Ye Faithful and Good King Wenceslas. According to some memories from Norris Hodgkins, her favorite was We Three Kings of Orient Are, and she hated I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas, which was strictly forbidden. Kathryn was not much interested in decorations, so she mostly agrees. But I'd like to say quickly that Weymouth Center opened in 1979, and they had their first carols at Weymouth, and they had champagne. And in 1981 was the first Christmas open house fundraiser organized by the Women of Weymouth. That continued, and I think you want to tell more about what you're doing today.
Kathryn, the pictures that Dottie is painting is very well expressed today in the extensive programming that you offer at Weymouth, isn't it?
It is, because he was an author and because Sam Reagan was also a poet laureate. At our founding, our first program, our big program, was the Writer in Residence program, which currently has expanded to now serve hundreds of residencies from across the state a year. And we serve writers at all stages, whether you're a newbie writer or a New York Times bestseller author. It is truly remarkable the number of relationships we've developed. And if you read your flyleaf and your pages and your books, you may notice a lot of them have been dedicated to Weymouth. Mm-hmm. We have phenomenal arts and humanities programs and lectures. We have a great lecture series that we've had banned book series. We've had the Dismal Swamp. We've had the Lighthouses of Cape Fear. We sell out. And special lectures and events, including The Power of the Press, Teresa Ann Fowler, who did A Well-Behaved Woman. And Vivian Howard came with the Country Bookshop, the very well-known Eastern North Carolina chef. We do a phenomenal write-on camp for kids in the summer, and last time we had them set up so they were mini writers in residence. They only came for the day, but we had people come speak to them from newspapers, from children's authors, publishing even, to all of these kids express an interest in becoming a writer when they get older. The Moore County Writers Competition, which is sponsored by the Cook Foundation, every year serves children from first grade all the way to octogenarians. All people are invited to compete. It goes off sometime between February and March usually, so keep a lookout. And no matter if you write nonfiction, poetry, or you like to do some short storytelling, you get paid if you win, and you're published. And we have been so lucky with our musical programming as well. I'd like Katie to jump in on that.
I'd love to. One of the things I love about the Southern Pines and Pinehurst community is a lot of the live music that we get in the area, and Weymouth is, of course, a major center for that. Dottie spoke about classical music Sundays. That will be back and online, so be sure to watch out for those groups. We've also got kind of a music in the round, similar to the Nashville, Tennessee Bluebird style, but you can bring your banjo, bring your fiddle, bring your beer, come sit in the musician circles on the weekends when Weymouth is open, post-pandemic. Really looking forward to that. We also have the Young Musicians Festival as well. And I had my first experience at Weymouth at a Sounds on the Grounds concert. I brought my husband and I came. We were just moving to Southern Pines and came to Weymouth to have supper and to hear some great music outside.
We've had a great success with our American Songbook series and John Hatcher and his team. And we also have monthly meetings of the Women of Weymouth, which has speakers. We have special events that you can enjoy. We have the James Boyd Book Club that Dottie has led for years at this point. And there's something for everyone. If you'd like to come garden Tuesdays and Fridays, even if you don't know how, all you need to do is bring your good attitude, show up in the morning, and it doesn't matter. They'll teach you. And that's how we keep our grounds up to date. So there are so many others, but these are just some of the highlights.
It gets back to what we started talking about in the first set. In order to keep these programs viable and everything about the Weymouth Center front and center, fundraising is a very important part, especially now of what you do. And you want to talk a little bit about some of the grants and some of the things that you're doing behind the scenes.
We have been very successful, and I hope you come visit. And if you are a regular visitor, you'll notice the upgrades that have been done. We have been lucky to receive grants from the M.S. Covington Foundation, Richard Marie Reynolds Foundation, the Cannon Foundation, the Palmer Foundation, and the North Carolina CARES Act for the Arts Grant. We have undergone window restoration, which included pulling them completely out, taking them apart, reglazing them, repainting them, fixing the weights. If you have old sash windows, you know what I'm talking about. Putting them back in, and then having them painted. We have replaced all the shutters on one side of the house. We are getting ready to do the other side. So by this spring, we will look brand spanking, shiny, and pretty. And we're doing roof work. We have done extensive work in the gardens. And I think I've been volunteering at Weymouth for 13 years. And honestly, the entire property looks better than it has ever looked. And even going back to the historical pictures at the end of the Boyd era, we really look great right now.
When you own and you're running what I consider to be hallowed grounds, the repairs, the maintenance, the upkeep, not inexpensive because you want to do it right.
You do. We're doing some roof work coming up, and when you have a slate roof, that is a very expensive undertaking. But it's rather like owning the money pit.
Yeah.
Only we don't own it. We just try to keep it up and move it forward, and we're excited to have this kind of support in grants. We have grant cycles coming up. But honestly, it's you and I and everyone in this community, and whatever support we can give financially,
Yep.
whatever support we can give with volunteer hours, that's what makes us work.
I will let people know that you have a very strong Facebook presence, and people can go on, since you're home right now and they have the time, and look at some of the older posts of some of the speakers that have come, some of the inspirational performances that can be open to the public, and it gives them a sort of an insight as to what the Weymouth Center can offer. We hope for better times soon. We need to get you guys up and running full throttle. Go to Facebook, and you also want to give them your website address, because it's a very intuitive website.
Yes, it's weymouthcenter.org. And yes, we're on Facebook. We're also on Instagram. And so as you're walking by on your walks at Weymouth, please take a selfie, take a picture of yourself, post it, let people know that the grounds are open and for the community to explore.
I want to thank all of you for coming in, Dottie. We're going to talk about you doing a show in 2021. We're going to do it. Katie Wyatt, it was a pleasure to meet you.
You too.
Kathryn, it's always great to have you on. And I want to remind people to go down to Eye Candy Gallery this week. It's almost Christmas. Those prints are gorgeous. Mm-hmm. They belong in a lot of the homes in Weymouth for the people who are stewards of Weymouth. And it's probably the nicest illustration, a reminder on a day-to-day basis people can look at. Just a gorgeous print at Eye Candy. And it all benefits the Weymouth Center.
It all benefits Weymouth Center, and Frank has been kind enough to even donate 15% of framing if you have the framing done there. So, and go by and check out Casino Guitars and look at our Yule Rock experience, because it's a lot of fun.
Okay. Thank you all for coming in, and we hope to have you back on in 2021 when things hopefully are going to be more open. And we can talk more about some of the great programs at the Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities.
Thank you.
Thank you all. This is All Things Moore County. Have a great week and a great Christmas.